Hello everyone, in this video I'll be ranking the most fun classes to play in Baldur's Gate 3. So I've had extensive history with playing all these classes and I do a ton of different build guides, so I'm going to be talking about my thoughts on which of these classes are the most fun to play. First things first, we got the Wizard, and the Wizard's actually a very interesting one because you can learn any scroll that you can find in the game, giving you a near endless amount of spells, and then you can just go into your spell book and prepare whichever ones you need. It's a very versatile class because you can do a whole lot of different things with it. You can use knock to unlock lock picking, and you got a bunch of different damage options. I think the Wizard's really great because you have all the options. It's got utility. It has everything, honestly, and very fun. I think that spellcasters in Baldur's Gate 3 are some of the best classes. Like, I would say magic, ranged, and then melee martial classes in terms of strength. So it's a pretty strong class. I would put the Wizard in the A tier, and the reason I'm going to put it in the A tier is because the Wizard has the ability to swap out any spell you want at any time, so you can just completely change your spells if you want on the fly. It mainly uses intelligence, so you don't have to focus on a bunch of different stats, really. The Wizard itself is a pretty great class, and you can go so many different ways with it. I like a Necromancer Wizard myself, because you get to be able to summon two summons per one corpse at level 6, so I think that that's really great. Wizard, easy A tier, versatile, it has a whole lot going for it. Next we get the Warlock. Now, they don't have the same spell slots as the other magic classes. They get their packed magic, which is refreshed on a short rest. I played a Warlock in my first ever playthrough. I think that the Warlock is a great multi-class, but playing a full 12 levels of Warlock has just not been fun. So, well, it is still fun, obviously. Baldur's Gate 3 is a really fun game, but I think that the other spellcasters are a little bit better than the Warlock. But adding it into other classes, the Warlock really gets to shine. I think that what worked best was my first playthrough. I did 5 levels of Paladin, 7 levels of Warlock. So I got to do 3 attacks with my weapon because you get the 1 attack from Paladin, and then also the packed weapon gives you another attack. So it has really good synergy in certain builds because you can get 3 attacks at level 10, which is faster than a fighter gets 3 attacks. But I wish it had more spell slots because it's kind of frustrating later levels, especially if you're just a Warlock. You don't have that many spell slots. If you multi-class it, you get their spell slots plus the packed magic, which makes it pretty good. But I would say it's another class that's, I would say probably like, I want to say A tier. Yeah, it's great because it can be multi-classed into some really interesting builds. I think the Wizard's a little bit more fun because you have way more options, but the Warlock is pretty cool too, and great for role-playing because you got the whole the deity, or I guess the fiend has really great options for in dialogue as well. Warlocks are pretty great. Now we got the Sorcerer, which I think is probably the most fun class to play. This is an easy S tier. Sorcerer S tier just makes sense. But what makes the Sorcerer so fun is you can cast a spell and then quicken spell and cast another spell. So you can use an action and a bonus action to cast spells, which makes this very interesting because you can set yourself up. Let's say outside of combat you cast Create Water, then you start combat with a Chain Lightning, and you follow it up with a Lightning Bolt or something like that. You can do 3 spells before the enemy even gets a chance to attack, which is awesome. But the Sorcerer itself is like a Wizard, but with way more versatility because you have not only you got the Quicken spell, which lets you cast spells as a bonus action, but on top of that, you also get the ability to convert your spell slots into sorcery points and then sorcery points into spell slots. So if you're like in a pickle in combat and you need another level 4 spell slot and you have a bunch of level 2s and level 1s, you can turn those into sorcery points and then turn it into a level 4 spell slot and then blast them away. It's really cool how much synergy you have. Or if you just want to turn your spell slots into sorcery points, you have so much customization in combat. It's incredible. And it has some of the strongest class in the game with the Storm Sorcerer and the Draconic Sorcerer, Lightning or Cold. All 3 of those are extremely powerful builds that can solo the game pretty much. The Sorcerer is just overpowered. I think it's the strongest class in the game, but it's also extremely fun to play. So if you're looking to play as a casting class, Sorcerer, it's great. Next we got the Rogue. Now the Rogue is good when you add the 3 levels of Rogue to get Thief's extra bonus action. That's a good usage of the Rogue. But playing a Rogue at level 12 just feels like you're way weaker than other classes. You don't get the extra bonus attacks. Your defense is pretty good because you can dodge a lot of attacks. But I just feel like the rogue is like, I like the monk if we're going to go into a class that's played like that, or even a bard. But the rogue itself has some nice additions to classes, like the Gloomstalker Ranger with the rogue assassin can be pretty good. But even just on its own, the rogue, I would say, is probably a C tier. I just like adding it to other classes for the extra bonus action. It's just not as strong as the other ones, and it can be fun to sneak around, but you can even just, I guess, for sneaking, it'd be like B tier, but adding in sneak and doing sneaks with like a monk, I think is just even stronger. So open hand monk, 3 levels of rogue, thief, perfect build. Next we got the ranger, and the ranger is probably also a C tier class. They're a half caster, they get heavy armor, they get a summon. It's got all the right markings to be a good class, but it's just not as fun to play as some of the other options out there. So the ranger, it's cool that you get if you go with the beastmaster, you get the nice summon in bear, or there's a few different options, wolves, hogs, but outside of that, it just feels like other classes do what it does way better. And while it's nice to be able to get heavy armor at level 1, the ranger just doesn't do much else. So C tier. Paladin, I think the paladin's pretty fun. What makes a paladin good and enjoyable is the fact that you can roleplay the paladin. Like, paladin's probably the most intensive class in terms of roleplay, because you got your pacts that or not pacts, you got your tenets, like the Oath of Ancients, Oath of Vengeance, that you have to uphold. So they have a lot of dialogue options in combat, but you have to be mindful if you don't want to break your oath. But if you do want to break your oath, then it's also pretty fun because you're trying to find ways to break that oath. So I think the paladin is a really enjoyable class overall, because not only the tenets that I was talking about, but you also get smite. And smites are extremely satisfying to see those big numbers on the screen, especially if you get a critical hit divine smite. It just feels good. So easy A tier, the paladin's pretty awesome. Next we got the monk. I think that the monk takes what the rogue does well and does it even better. Now, the monk at level 9 with 3 levels of rogue thief, I think is one of the best builds in the game. I'm putting monk up in the S tier. The monk itself is really cool because you can jump really far, but being able to do the flurry of blows and the key resonance, it just has so many options for damage. You can also, like, just speaking of one, I'm only talking about the open hand, but the shadow monk's pretty cool because it's like a rogue. It can teleport around in darkness. That's pretty cool. And then also the Way of the Four Elements monk is like a fighter, but it also can cast. It's super awesome. You do use your chi points to be able to cast whenever you take that subclass, and you don't get as many spells as the others, but you can get things like Fireball, Scorching Ray. So it is pretty good overall, I think. And that's just talking about the other subclass. But back to Open Hand Monk, this is an extremely powerful build. It can do, like, as a bonus action, can deal a crap ton of damage. You can punch targets multiple times. I think that the monk, I neglected it at first. I thought that this was like kind of a whack class, but I grew to realize the monk's one of the most fun because you can just jump across the entire map, punch people to death. The animations for it are fantastic. And then jump back around, punch someone else out. It's seriously so much fun. If you haven't played a monk before, Open Hand Monk level 9 with the Rogue Thief level 3. I have a build guide on that on my channel. It's extremely powerful. Next we get the Fighter. The Fighter is... I like the Fighter, don't get me wrong, with where I'm going to put the Fighter, but it's just a kind of bland class. If you choose the Battle Master, you do get a few maneuvers that really opens things up. Like you get your menacing attack, you got your pushing attack. So you can do things that other classes do with spells, with your weapon attacks, which I think is cool. But the Champion Fighter is pretty bland. All you get is that increased 5% chance of critical hit, which is nice, but just feels lackluster. You also get an extra fighting style with the Champion Fighter. And then the Eldritch Knight, which is probably the most interesting of the fighters, but you're pretty much bottlenecked into doing a throwing build if you go with the Eldritch Knight, because the Eldritch Knight gets the you get the pack or bind weapon, so you throw your weapon and it returns to your hand. That's cool. A lot of fun to play around with those builds, but I've had times where I've accidentally thrown my weapon down a chasm, and it's annoying to go reload an earlier save. Like, if you accidentally misclick and miss an enemy, you'll throw your weapon into the void. Frustrating. I've had that happen before. The Fighter itself it's a great class. It's very strong, but I would say it's B tier in terms of how fun it is. I have more fun with something like a monk that you do similar damage output to a fighter, but you have way more options at your disposal. And even something like a barbarian, I feel like is slightly more fun because you can go into rage, and then you have to use your noodle to figure out what the best option is for barbarian. With fighter, it's just go in, attack. That's just simplifying it down to its roots, but the fighter itself just it feels bland compared to some other classes. That just speaks to how fun the other classes are. Next, we got Druid. I think that the Druid is a very underrated class. People kind of trash on the Druid I've seen online, but the Druid is a spellcaster, really good spellcaster. Circle the land, you get a ton of spells. It's also crowd control, one of the best crowd control in the game, Bard or Druid being the best. But it's also the best tank in the game. With a Moon Druid, you have 2 wild shapes, and you can go Owlbear, and you get a ton of health. The Druid itself it's underrated for sure. You get a lot of summons as well. Like at level 7, you get the minor elementals, but you also get the Wood Woad, and you're the only one that can get a Wood Woad. And then it can also summon in someone, and it can use Spike Growth for crowd control. It's really fun to play. I think that you should always have a Druid. At some point in your playthrough, try out the Druid. It's freaking awesome. They have 3 specific armor types that are specific just to the Druid as well, so you got those going for you as well. But another thing about the Druid is the Spore Druid, which is tied with the Wizard Necromancer for being the best Necromancer builds. I prefer the Spore Druid because it just has cool animations. You do these like little funky dances, your eyes glow, and you got the molded zombies, they're fungal zombies. But you also have the ability to go into your symbiotic entity form, which gives you some extra bonuses. And you're the only class in the game that can haste 4 people at a time. Broken. With the armor of the Spore Keeper, the Spore Druid can use their haste spores, which creates an area of haste that gives your entire team haste. So they can just walk into it, get haste. Boom. It's great. It's a really fun class. Lots of usefulness in combat for both healing and defense and crowd control, tanking, damage. It does it all. Next we have the Cleric. I think the Cleric's another really fun class. It has a lot of subclasses. You get 7 different options. My favorite's being Tempest Cleric. I think that the Tempest Cleric's really great because you get the Channel Divinity to do maximum amounts of lightning damage. So with Create Water, which will double it, you can purposely do your lightning attacks with full damage, which is pretty big. Also, the light Cleric has Fireball and is a really fun fire casting class. I had a lot of fun with Light Cleric because you can pop up Spirit Guardians, run through people as a Beyblade, just tearing into them with Radiant or Necrotic damage, and you can also just drop Fireballs like crazy. I think the Cleric is an S tier class, maybe top of the A tier. I'll put it at top of the A tier. It just has so much versatility. Play a Light Cleric, play a Tempest Cleric, and if you want, go with the War Domain Cleric. All 3 are really fun. And a Life Cleric too if you want to go the Hailing route, but I think that a Cleric's better to be a damage dealer and also have just healing as a backup. Next we got the Bard. Now the Bard's a really fun class, I gotta say. You have the most unique dialogue options, and it's a class with the most unique dialogue options in dialogue. So you got not only that outside of combat, but in combat, Sword Bard, you got flourishes, you got spells, you got it all, really. And if you got the Band of the Mystic Scoundrel and the Helmet of Arcane Acuity, you can attack with the arrow many targets, get a +10 to your spell save DC, and then you can also, with the Band of Mystic Scoundrel, cast as a bonus action your crowd control spells. So you can do upcast a command on like 5 targets, and it'll have a spell save DC of like 30, 35, somewhere in that range, depending on how many attacks you got off. That is more than enough that targets won't be able to resist your crowd control. So the Bard is probably I would say for me, the second most fun class to play. The Bard itself is just an absolute hoot. I would say that the Sword Bard is the best, but even going with a Lore Bard, you get a lot of different spells, and it can pair well with other classes. So yeah, I think the Bard's awesome. You also get Song of Rest. You also can play your music, which is fun. So yeah, I would say it's an S tier class. Finally, we got the Barbarian, which it's, as I said, it's like a bit better than the Fighter. Oops, I didn't mean to put it in the F tier. It won't let me take it out. I'll put it right here for right now. I think that I will put it above Fighter in the B tier. It's just, like, it is a little bit more complex than the Fighter because you have to know when to rage, what's going to be most optimal to do. And Throw Zerker builds are pretty popular. Like, so adding in the Barbarian with a few levels of Rogue, and then maybe a few levels of the ranger or the fighter. Those three all go together well. That makes it a little bit more fun, but if you want to have a fun barbarian, do the wild magic one. Or the wild one, because it just gives you all these different crazy attacks. Wild magic sorcerer is also really fun, but very unpredictable. Not the strongest, but it's fun. I would say, like, on a good day, barbarian could be an A tier. Same with the fighter. Like, these two could be A tiers. I just feel like they're too bland in what they do. They just attack. Melee classes in this game are just a little bit less fun than our other options, like sorcerer, bard. Bard has the ability to attack 4 people in 1 turn with its slashing flourishes, and it gets level 6 spell slots. So it's a full caster that can also attack, so it kind of puts these to shame, but not saying these are bad classes any means. Fighter's one of the best in the game. It's just like if you want to do the fighter route, the bard can do it as well. And you can also dip a single level cleric for the heavy armor. So you got options. Monk, great class, jump around, punch people in the face. The boo 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 boo. I love the attacks in it. It's just super cool. So, yeah, these are my thoughts on the most fun classes to play in Baldur's Gate 3. Sorcerer, Bard, Monk, and Druid are the most fun. Cleric, Wizard, Warlock, and Paladin are also, honestly, all these classes are fun. These are just my thoughts, but please let me know in the comments what you think of these, what you think the most fun class in Baldur's Gate 3 is. If you found this video fun and useful, please hit that subscribe button below, and I'll see you all in the next video.